Kamala Harris wins, and your wallet's in for a wild ride. From housing dreams to tax schemes, things are about to get seriously unpredictable. Ready to see what's coming? Housing? Buy or cry. It's 2024 and the dream of owning a home is still alive. Well, sort of. Kamala Harris has a bold new plan to tackle the housing crisis. Whether it's the solution we need or just another layer of frustration is still up in the air. Harris is throwing down the gauntlet with a promise to build 3 million new homes to help balance out supply and demand. More homes should mean lower prices, right? But hold on, don't pop the champagne just yet. Building those homes is like trying to juggle flaming swords while riding a unicycle. The housing market has been facing a labor shortage for years, and even with Harris's push to cut through bureaucratic red tape, don't expect construction to start tomorrow. If you're waiting for prices to drop, you might need to get comfortable because it's going to take a while. And that's just one part of it. Harris is also promising $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers. Sounds great, but here's where things get tricky. When suddenly everyone has extra cash to throw around, what do you think happens to prices? They rise faster than your hopes on payday. You could find yourself in a bidding war with half the neighborhood, and before you know it, the down payment feels more like a participation trophy. So sure, buy now, but you might still end up crying at the closing table. But it's not just home buyers Harris is focused on. Renters, you're in her sights too. Harris wants to go after corporate landlords who've been using fancy pricing algorithms to squeeze every last penny out of tenants. She's proposing regulations to stop these companies from driving up rents, and even plans to prevent big investors from snatching up single-family homes just to rent them out. On paper, this sounds like it could level the playing field. But there's a flip side. Regulation often means fewer incentives for these companies to offer competitive rents or invest in new properties. If landlords start pulling back, we could see fewer rentals available and even higher prices as competition tightens. Now, here's the real kicker: materials costs and supply chain chaos. Even with the best of intentions, the construction industry has been hit harder than your wallet after a night out. Lumber, steel, concrete, you name it. The prices are through the roof. And no, they're not coming down anytime soon. Harris's plan to flood the market with new homes? Great, in theory, but it's going to take a while for those houses to pop up. And let's not forget about property taxes. As local governments struggle to balance their budgets, new homes might lead to increased taxes in some areas, meaning even if you manage to buy, staying in your new home might cost you more than expected. Kind of like buying a pet. Cute at first, but wait until you see the vet bills. Bottom line, Harris's housing plan could be a game changer, or it could be like showing up to a barbecue with a bag of chips while everyone else brought steak. You can either buy or cry, but the road ahead is anything but certain. Healthcare revolution. If you thought navigating the healthcare system was tough now, buckle up. Kamala Harris is ready to flip the entire script. Her plan? Bring the costs down, make healthcare more affordable, and overhaul a system that's been draining wallets like a leaky faucet. First things first, Harris wants to lower healthcare costs across the board, and she's not messing around. We're talking about expanding Medicare to cover more Americans, reducing prescription drug prices, and making sure your next doctor visit doesn't feel like you're buying a new car. Sounds good, right? But before you start celebrating, let's talk about how that might play out. Harris's plan hinges on heavy regulation and government intervention, which means pushing back hard against Big Pharma. And if there's one thing we've learned, it's that Big Pharma doesn't go down without a fight. Expect some serious pushback. And not just in Congress. Think courtroom drama, but with higher stakes than who gets the last slice of pizza. And here's the kicker. Remember how complicated your insurance paperwork already is? Well, Harris's overhaul might mean more paperwork, because adding new systems, even if they're supposed to help, always seems to come with an extra stack of forms. So yeah, your healthcare could cost less, but you might still spend half of your life on hold with customer service. Darker still, You might finally be able to afford seeing a doctor, but figuring out who's paying for what could become its own full-time job. Harris is also aiming to expand Medicare coverage to include dental, vision, and hearing. Finally, some relief for your neglected teeth and fading eyesight. But every silver lining has a cloud. Expanding benefits doesn't come cheap. Bigger government spending means something's got to give. You might get your dental work covered, but those other budget priorities might disappear faster than socks in a dryer. It's not just about saving money at the pharmacy. Harris is eyeing universal healthcare, and she's all about making sure everyone gets covered, whether you're a gig worker, a freelancer, or that guy who still sends faxes. Sounds like a win, until you think about the taxpayer bill. More people covered means more spending, and while she's pointing to the wealthy to foot the bill, don't be surprised if that cost starts creeping down the ladder. Trickle-down taxes, anyone? And speaking of costs, prescription drugs are on Harris's radar too. She wants to slash prices by having the government negotiate directly with drug companies. Great in theory, unless Big Pharma retaliates by cutting back on new research. That revolutionary pill you've been waiting for, it might take longer to arrive, or worse, cost more because the companies will find some other way to make up for the lost profits. Private insurance companies aren't exactly thrilled either. With more Americans potentially moving toward government-backed healthcare, private insurers could start feeling the heat. Expect a creative range of responses, from higher premiums to fewer perks, as they try to keep you from jumping ship. It's like buying a gym membership only to find out the free smoothie bar is now a paid upgrade. At the end of the day, Harris's healthcare plan could be a lifesaver for millions, or it could be like going to a buffet where half the items are sold separately. You might get the main course, but the side dishes could start costing more than you bargained for. A+ Paycheck. Ready to see your paycheck get an upgrade? Well, Kamala Harris has big plans to give American workers a much-needed raise. But as always, there's more to the story than just bigger numbers on your paycheck. Harris is a long-term advocate for raising the minimum wage. She's pushing hard for a national $15 flat. For workers stuck at the current federal minimum of $7.25 an hour, this sounds like a dream. Imagine, almost double the paycheck, without having to put in more hours. But hold up. Before you start planning that vacation, there's a flip side. A wage boost like this doesn't just affect workers. It hits businesses too. Small business owners might feel like they're drowning in extra payroll costs, and you know what happens next? Higher prices for the rest of us. That $5 burger might suddenly come with a $10 price tag. You win some, you lose some. Then there's the gig economy. You know, the world of food delivery apps, freelance projects, and side hustles. Harris wants to redefine the gig economy by pushing for more worker protections and benefits. Sounds fair. After all, gig workers deserve a slice of the pie too, right? But turning gig workers into full employees comes with a cost. Companies like Uber, DoorDash, and others could be forced to provide benefits like healthcare and paid leave. While that's great for workers, the companies might respond by cutting jobs or slapping higher fees on customers. That $10 ride home might soon feel like you're booking first class on a private jet. But Harris isn't stopping there. She's also got plans to strengthen union power. More bargaining power for workers means better wages and benefits, on paper. In reality, if unions get too strong, some industries could see labor costs skyrocket. And when businesses feel the pinch, they tend to pass the buck to consumers. So yeah, you might get that pay bump, but don't be surprised if your new paycheck gets eaten up by higher prices on everything else. It's like winning a prize, only to realize the fine print says, cash value, 1 cent. On the bright side, Harris is also targeting gender and racial pay gaps. She's committed to narrowing the gap, making sure that everyone, no matter their gender or background, gets paid equally for the same work. It's a long overdue fix, but tackling such systemic issues is easier said than done. Expect companies to resist change, and even if the laws pass, it could take years before you see the impact in your direct deposit. And let's not forget about taxes. To fund these wage increases and new worker benefits, the wealthy and corporations are going to be paying more. Harris plans to raise corporate taxes and hit high-income earners harder. While this sounds like a win for the average worker, don't expect it to come without a ripple effect. Businesses faced with higher tax bills often look for ways to cut costs, and that could mean fewer jobs or even more automation. One day you're celebrating a raise, the next you're teaching a robot to do your job. Dark, but not impossible. So, is an A+ paycheck coming your way? Maybe, but remember, when wages go up, so does the cost of pretty much everything else. You could see more cash in your pocket, but before you know it, that extra paycheck might just be paying for the same old life. Tax the rich till they twitch. Here we go. Kamala Harris is bringing the heat, and if you're a billionaire or a big corporation, you might want to grab a towel. The plan? Tax the wealthy until they feel the burn. And for the average worker, that might sound like sweet, sweet justice. Harris is looking to raise taxes on the rich, and we're not talking small change. Her proposals include raising the corporate tax rate and hiking taxes on individuals with high incomes. The idea is simple. Make the top 1% pay their fair share, and use that money to fund things like healthcare, education, and wage increases. Sounds pretty fair, right? Well, if you're not the one writing those big checks, sure. But here's where things get interesting. Remember that the rich have a tendency to find loopholes? They didn't get rich by accident. So, while Harris wants to close those loopholes, tax planning wizards will likely find new ones. It's like playing whack-a-mole with billionaires. Every time you think you've hit them, another pops up with a brand new way to keep their money. And then there's the question of whether these tax hikes will actually bring in much revenue as expected. On paper, taxing the rich looks like a great way to boost government income, but in reality, some wealthy individuals and corporations might just take their money elsewhere. Imagine the rich packing up their yachts and heading to tax havens. It's like inviting everyone to a party, but all the big spenders ghost you at the last minute. Harris isn't stopping with income taxes. She also has her eye on capital gains tax. That's the money people will make from investments, and right now, it's taxed at a lower rate than regular income. Harris wants to fix that by taxing capital gains more like ordinary income. For investors and Wall Street types, this is the stuff of nightmares. If you've got a hefty stock portfolio, you could be looking at a much bigger tax bill. Cue the twitching. And let's not forget about corporations. Harris wants to reverse the Trump-era tax cuts and raise the corporate tax rate, forcing big businesses to pay more. In theory, this sounds like a solid way to fund public programs, but let's be real. When businesses pay more in taxes, they don't just eat the cost. They pass it along to the rest of us, raising prices on everything from groceries to gadgets. So while the rich are paying, don't be surprised if your next trip to the store leaves you twitching at the checkout. And of course, the wealth tax. Harris has floated the idea of a tax on the ultra-wealthy's net worth, not just what they earn each year, but everything they own. For billionaires, this is like waking up to find out your mattress is made of tax forms. But for everyone else, it sounds like justice is finally being served. Just don't be surprised if the billionaires find new ways to hide their wealth, from shell companies to offshore accounts. It's a cat and mouse game where the stakes are in the billions. So, will Harris's plan make the rich twitch, or will they just find new ways to dance around the rules? One thing's for sure, if you're part of the 99%, it might feel like a win. But if you're one of the rich, the next tax season could have you shaking in your designer shoes. Green dreams, high stakes. Ready for the green energy revolution? Well, Kamala Harris sure is. She's putting her chips on the table with an ambitious plan to tackle climate change and transform the US energy landscape. On paper, it sounds like a win-win. Clean energy, new jobs, and a healthier planet. But as always, there's a catch. Actually, there are several. First up, Harris is all about investing in renewable energy. Solar, wind, electric vehicles, you name it. The goal? Make the US a leader in clean energy while slashing carbon emissions. Sounds like a bright future, right? But here's where the stakes get high. Transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy is like trying to swap out an engine while driving 100 miles per hour. We've built our entire economy on oil and gas, and making that shift is going to take time, money, and, brace yourself, more government intervention than your local DMV. Then there's the job question. Harris's plan promises to create millions of new green jobs. If you're someone looking to work in solar or wind, this sounds great. But if you're in coal or oil, it feels more like a green nightmare. While Harris is pushing for training programs to help fossil fuel workers transition to new industries, the reality is that not everyone's going to make that jump. Imagine being a coal miner one day and expected to install solar panels the next. Yeah, not exactly a smooth transition. And speaking of jobs, Harris also wants to make sure the green revolution doesn't leave anyone behind. That means equity in the workforce, with a focus on marginalized communities. This could be a game changer for undeserved populations, opening up new opportunities in a rapidly growing sector. But here's the thing. Creating an equitable green workforce isn't just about hiring. It's about training, infrastructure, and investment in areas that have been left behind for decades. It's like trying to install solar panels on a house with no roof. You've got to build the foundation first. Then there's the cost. Going green isn't cheap. Harris wants to pour trillions into the clean energy sector, but guess who's footing the bill? Part of it will come from, you guessed it, higher taxes on corporations and the wealthy. But let's not pretend that companies won't pass some of those costs onto the consumers. Sure, your electricity might come from solar panels, but don't be shocked if your electric bill has a few extra zeros at the end. And let's talk about the fossil fuel industry. Harris's plan is like giving the oil and gas companies an eviction notice. But getting rid of fossil fuels isn't as easy as flipping a switch. These industries are massive, providing not just energy, but jobs, infrastructure, and a big chunk of our GDP. Expect a lot of pushback from this sector, because when you threaten an industry worth billions, they're not just going to sit quietly and watch it disappear. Cue the lawsuits, lobbying, and a whole lot of political drama. Finally, the global angle. Sure, the US going green is a huge step, but climate change is a global issue. What happens when the US cuts emissions, but the other big polluters, China, India, keep cranking out carbon? We could end up playing environmental catch-up while other countries still reap the economic benefits of cheap fossil fuels. So, while Harris's plan is ambitious, it's also a high-stakes gamble with no guaranteed global payoff. In the end, Harris's green dreams could spark an energy revolution, or leave us with high hopes and even higher utility bills. The stakes? Well, they've never been higher. Tech for all, unless you're a boomer. In Kamala Harris's vision for the future, everyone's getting a piece of the tech pie. Well, almost everyone. She's pushing for a massive expansion in tech access, and it's clear she wants to bring the US into a new digital age. Whether it's broadband in every home, more funding for STEM education, or making sure tech isn't just for the Silicon Valley elite. Harris is going all in on making sure the future is wired. The first big push? Nationwide broadband access. Harris wants to ensure that every household, no matter how rural or remote, has access to high-speed internet. Sounds great, right? No more buffering videos or being stuck with Wi-Fi that feels like dial-up. But here's the catch. Laying down the infrastructure for this isn't exactly a weekend project. We're talking billions in spending and years of construction to get those high-speed lines everywhere they need to go. And if you think that the cost is coming out of thin air, think again. As usual, someone's going to foot the bill, and it's likely to show up on your internet bill faster than a sneaky subscription fee. Harris is also pushing to ensure tech equity, aiming to close the digital divide that leaves many communities, especially those in undeserved areas, without access to the latest technology. This means more investments in tech education, making sure students across the country are prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. But remember, not everyone's jumping into the future at the same speed. While younger generations are coding apps in elementary school, older generations might still be struggling to figure out how to mute themselves on Zoom. So, while Harris wants to bring tech to everyone, some folks might need a crash course just to keep up. Then there's big tech regulation. Harris is all about reining in tech giants, like the ones controlling your search engine, social media feeds, and possibly even your fridge. She wants to curb their power, promote competition, and protect user data. On paper, this sounds like a great move. No more data breaches or companies using your search history to sell you stuff you thought about buying. But here's the twist. When you start cracking down on big tech, don't be surprised if your favorite free services suddenly start charging for things that were once free. After all, those companies need to make money somehow, and if ads get cut back, your wallet might be the next target. And let's not forget automation. Harris is all about tech growth, but with that comes the rise of automation, and with automation comes job loss. Sure, she's pushing for new jobs in tech industries, but let's be honest. Not everyone's going to pivot from truck driving to software engineering overnight. For every job created in the tech sector, there's a risk that others will disappear. The tech revolution might bring more jobs, but if you're not ready to learn how to code, you could end up feeling left behind. In the end, Harris's tech plan is set to propel the US into the future. But whether everyone can keep up is another question. If you're ready to embrace the latest gadgets, apps, and fast internet speeds, this could be a win. But for those still trying to figure out what the cloud is, well, let's just say the future might leave you buffering. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to check out our next video. Subscribe and turn on the notifications for the next updates.